You ready for it?
Listen up. From Corps, just came in, effective immediately. All troops stand fast on present positions.
Standing fast.
Want to hear it? You ready for it? Listen up. German army surrendered.
Happy VE Day. It's early May 1945. The race is on to see who can reach Adolf Hitler's Eagle's Nest first. There are troops of the 3rd Infantry Division, 101st Airborne Division, and the French 2nd Armored Division, racing through these winding Bavarian roads and countrysides, crossing bridges and running through these picturesque glens. And they're all desiring the same thing: the prestige of capturing Hitler's beloved alpine retreat first. But who got there first, and how does it compare with the iconic HBO series Band of Brothers? Let's go ahead and take a look at that right now. By May 4th and 5th, 1945, various Allied units were racing to reach the top of this mountain, overlooking Berchtesgaden, a symbolic home of the Third Reich. The 101st Airborne Division, as depicted in the HBO series Band of Brothers, is among them. Now, this leads to a little bit of debate and even controversy among historians. Who gets here first? All of these different nationalities and units claim the prize for their own. But who really earned that title in the long run? In short, a lot of these units reach this mountaintop community at the exact same time, and they're arriving at all of these different points. They arrive at Berchtesgaden, the community below this mountain. Troops are arriving at the Berghof, Hitler's personal home, which he visited quite frequently. Less frequently, what he visited during the war was the place right here. Right now we're nearly 6,000 feet above sea level, and down below it's a perfectly sunny, crystal clear day, and very faintly you can see the Bavarian Alps opening up in the fog here in the background. And certainly many Allied troops desired a view much like this. This is a good opportunity, though, to talk about the Kelstein House itself, better known as Hitler's Eagle's Nest. This was a construction project that implemented the labor, often forced labor, of nearly 4,000 individuals, and it was prepared for the Fuhrer for his 50th birthday in 1939, which, coincidentally, also happened to be the 19th birthday of Ronald Speirs, one of the men who captures this place in May of 1945. Despite the cost, despite all of the labor, Hitler only visits this place officially 14 times. In the mini-series, they claim this is because he had a fear of heights, but also it had a rather inefficient elevator, and it took about 10 minutes to ascend the 400, 500 feet from the parking area at the base of this ledge up to the house itself. So it was a house with some inefficiencies, but as we take a look here at this view, we can certainly see why they thought it was worthwhile. In the series, we see paratroopers struggling to work their way through these rather steep ravines and passes. At one point, they bring in engineers and improvised explosives to try to clear them. In some instances, bridges had been blown. Paratroopers had to descend the ravines. They had to climb up the opposite ones, oftentimes while doing so under sporadic enemy fire. And so the frustration of trying to move through this terrain, which did not have the infrastructure to support all of these tens of thousands of men roaming through the area. It was a very big hurdle that Allied forces had to overcome. The other great frustration, as expressed by Colonel Robert Sink, was the belief that the French 2nd Armored Division might beat the Americans to the punch. When American troops reach the elevator 500 feet below the Kelstein house, some of them encounter a French engineer from the 2nd Armored Division by the name of Yves Regnier. And Regnier had a rather interesting statement for them. He said that he did not have enough explosives to blast through the door, but he assured them that there is something interesting, if not important, behind those doors. And he said that almost as a challenge to the paratroopers. And with that, they decided that they weren't going to wait for an elevator ride. They were going to ascend that final 500 feet all on their own. The paratroopers make their way up to the house, and they enter the property with weapons drawn. And it had been here, within these buildings and within these complexes and the surrounding properties, that some of the most heinous crimes ever perpetuated by humankind had been planned out. As one reporter recalled, here were some of the plundered treasures of Europe. In this building, at the Berghof, at the homes of Himmler, Bormann, and Goering, there were vast caches of wine, champagne, art, tapestries, rugs, artifacts and artwork from all of the countries that had been conquered over the previous years. It seemed that these stolen artifacts were now among the few treasures of distinction that were left of a now crumbled empire that had prided itself on surviving 1,000 years, but it lasted less than 15. While many of those cultural treasures were ultimately returned to their parent countries, any artifact or souvenir or furniture or silverware associated with the Third Reich that wasn't nailed down was sought out and taken by these paratroopers. And we see depictions of this at length in the series. Most notably, we have paratrooper Alton Moore, who discovers Hitler's personal scrapbook. And he rather deceitfully takes it home and lies to his superiors in the process. Major Dick Winters himself was not immune to taking souvenirs. He mailed over 24 enemy weapons back home. As it turns out, being battalion commander has its perks. Among other items seized were over 100,000 bottles of fine liquor, champagne, and wine, taken from the personal collection of Hermann Goering. And then also, we see the likes of Harry Welsh going into the Berchtesgadener Hof Hotel and taking home his silverware to his bride-to-be, Kitty Grogan. Suffice it to say, if you didn't walk away with a good souvenir from Berchtesgaden or the Eagle's Nest, if you were a U.S. soldier in May of 1945, then you only had yourself to blame. A number of years after the war, as he was writing his very insightful memoir, Parachute Infantry, veteran David Webster wrote a really entertaining article for the Saturday Evening Post, for which he frequently wrote. And it summed up this situation best. The article was entitled, we drank Hitler's champagne. And there was really, in their minds, no better way to commemorate VE Day. We can think of the Eagle's Nest as a place associated with the tyranny of the Third Reich, where these evil masterminds who plotted to take over the world and wipe out what they thought were inferior races, has in the years since become a place not to commemorate their evil and their wrongdoing, but rather it has become a place associated with the liberation of Europe and the conquering of that evil. And the series Band of Brothers contributes to that conversation and that idea of celebrating the downfall of Nazi Germany. And indeed, that's a damn good thing to celebrate. So which Allied unit got to the Eagle's Nest first? We can't say with absolute certainty, and perhaps in the long run it does not matter, but we can say with absolute certainty that so many laureates and personalities and celebrities and iconic generals associated with the Allied war effort came to visit this place in the days and weeks following, including none other than Dwight D. Eisenhower himself. And in short, this place had become a tourist attraction, and as you can see, it still is to this very day.